we're going to look at how do we graph the function of sine. So if we were to look at the function y equals the sine of x, and we wanted to graph it, what we're doing is we are pairing an angle with a value of sine. So firstly, if our angles are going to be measured by our x, and so we want different angle measures that we can use. Well, the unit circle goes from 0 to 360 degrees, or 0 to 2 pi. So we'll do it in terms of degrees for now. Obviously, if we split that in half, this would be 180 degrees. And split these into twos, we would have 90 degrees and 270. So this represents the whole trip around the unit circle. Now we have to figure out how do we plot the values of sine along this thing. So the maximum value of sine, the biggest it can get is 1, and the smallest it can get is -1. So this is another tip for us. Now the other values are a little different. So we know that 1/2 exists, but we also have, the square root of 2 over 2, and we have the square root of 3 over 2. So just really quick, the square root of 2 over 2 is roughly 0.7, and the square root of 3 over 2 is about 0.87. So it's they're close to 1, but not all the way up there. So we're going to kind of reference these as we go along. So for the equation y equals sine x, we start off at 0. So this is an important fact. Sine starts at 0. Now, as we move along, let's say we go to 90 degrees. The sine of 90 degrees is 1. The sine of 180 degrees goes back to 0. The sine of 270 degrees, that makes -1. And then the sine of 360 goes back to here. Now, some people might be tempted to just connect the dots real quick and do that, but that's not exactly what's going on. What happens is these middle values, as we kind of break these into different little chunks, we're going to have values that kind of curl. And as they kind of curl around, we end up with what you could say is more of kind of, they call these, funny enough, sinusoidal functions. So you can see that there's a nice little curvature to it. There are no flat points. It's a nice stream, nice curve there. So you can use the unit circle to kind of fill in these different particular values. The big thing with this function of y equals sine is that it starts at 0. That's really important because it is pretty much the same thing as cosine, but cosine starts at a different value. We also know another thing about sine, that it has what's called an amplitude of 1. Well, what is an amplitude? An amplitude is how far from the middle of a periodic function, or from the average, that your max goes up and your min goes down. So as you can see, this is the middle of this function is a 0. We're at +1 and -1 down here. So our amplitude is said to be 1. So two ways you can think about it. You can do your max minus your min and divide it by 2. It's another way to figure out that value of what your amplitude is. Now we'll talk more later about what different things that go on with this function, but this is important to note. The amplitude of 1, it starts at 0 and it cycles around. So it goes up to its max down to its min, and then back up around. And as we know from before, this will keep repeating forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, as long as we keep going.